You lied to me!
Jace, I can explain.
The rain hammered against our floor-to-ceiling windows like an angry customer demanding a refund. I sat in my leather chair, laptop balanced on my knees, pretending to review security protocols for our latest client, while actually watching my wife, Rory, stumble through the front door at 2 a.m. She kicked off her designer heels with the grace of a drunk flamingo, her platinum hair disheveled from whatever girls' night adventure she'd been on. The expensive perfume couldn't quite mask the smell of whiskey and poor decisions that followed her like a cloud. "Jace," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who thought they were being quiet but absolutely wasn't. "You still up, honey?" I closed the laptop and set it aside, watching as she navigated our pristine living room like it was an obstacle course. 3 years of marriage, and I'd never seen her this careless. Something was different tonight. "Right here," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Good time with the girls?" Rory turned toward me, and even in the dim light from the city outside, I could see the flush in her cheeks, the glassy look in her eyes. But it wasn't just the alcohol. There was something else there, a kind of reckless confidence that made my stomach tighten. "Oh, you know how it is," she said, dropping her purse on the marble coffee table with a thud. Mira was going on and on about her latest case, and then we met up with some of Callum's friends at that new place downtown. Callum. She'd been mentioning him a lot lately. Some trust fund kid who'd apparently made it big as a lifestyle influencer, whatever that meant. I'd seen his Instagram, all perfect abs and motivational quotes that sounded like they'd been written by a committee of self-help books. "Sounds fun," I said, though every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of cybersecurity work was telling me to dig deeper. "Callum was there?" She laughed, and the sound had an edge to it that I'd never heard before. "Callum was definitely there. You know, Jace, I've been thinking—" Here it comes, I thought. Whatever bomb she was about to drop, I could feel it building in the air between us like static before a storm. Thinking about what? Rory moved closer, swaying slightly, and for a moment I thought she might try to sit on my lap like she used to when we were dating. Instead, she stopped just out of reach and looked down at me with something that might have been pity. About how young I still am. How much life I have left to live. She paused, running her tongue across her lower lip. About how tonight I realized I could walk into any bar in this city and find 2 men half your age who would be thrilled just to buy me a drink. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not quite anger yet, but something sharper and more focused. "Oh, really?" I said, keeping my voice level. "Just like that?" "Just like that." She snapped her fingers, nearly losing her balance. 35 isn't old, Jace. Not for a woman who takes care of herself. Not for someone who still has options. I stood up slowly, setting my laptop on the side table with deliberate care. "And what exactly are you trying to tell me, Rory?" For a split second, something flickered across her face. Maybe regret, maybe fear. But then that reckless confidence was back, armor bright and twice as sharp. "I'm telling you that maybe it's time we both admitted this isn't working anymore. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending we're still the people who got married 3 years ago." "I see." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights bleeding through the rain. Behind me, I could hear Rory fumbling with her phone, probably texting someone, probably Callum. "And you've given this a lot of thought, have you?" "More than you might think." I turned back to face her. She was indeed texting, her fingers flying across the screen with the muscle memory of someone who'd been having a lot of conversations lately. "Well," I said, moving toward the kitchen, "I suppose I should thank you for your honesty. Can I get you some water? You look like you might need it." She looked up from her phone, blinking in surprise. Whatever reaction she'd been expecting, casual politeness, wasn't it? Yes, water would be good." I filled a glass from the filtered tap, taking my time, using the moment to think. Rory had always been dramatic, but this felt different, calculated, like she'd been rehearsing this conversation, maybe with someone else. When I handed her the water, she took it without meeting my eyes. "Jace, I don't want this to be ugly," she said. "We're both adults. We can handle this maturely." "Of course we can." I sat back down, picking up my laptop again. "Though I have to ask, when you say you could find 2 men half my age, are we talking hypothetically, or have you already done some market research?" Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught the faintest smile before she looked back at me. "Does it matter?" "I suppose it doesn't." I opened the laptop and pulled up a browser window. "Though for the record, half my age would be 19. That seems a little young, even for someone with your options. You know what I meant." "I do. I absolutely do." I typed in a URL, fingers moving across the keys with practiced efficiency. In fact, I think I understand more than you realize." Something in my tone must have registered because she set down the water glass and really looked at me for the first time since she'd come home. What's that supposed to mean? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I turned the laptop screen toward her. There, in all their high-definition glory, were screenshots of text messages. Her text messages. To Callum. From earlier tonight, and yesterday, and last week, and the week before that. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. You see, Rory, the thing about being married to someone in cybersecurity is that we tend to be pretty good at finding information, especially when that information is sitting on an unlocked phone that shares the same cloud account as my laptop. She reached for the phone like it might somehow undo what I'd already seen, but I held up a hand. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them out loud. We both know what they say. I closed the laptop and set it aside again. The question is, what do we do now? Jace, I can explain. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning this conversation for weeks, maybe months. The only thing I'm wondering is whether you were planning to tell me about Callum before or after you served me with papers. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since I'd known her, Rory was completely speechless. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up again. You're going to go upstairs and sleep off whatever liquid courage got you through tonight's performance. Tomorrow we're going to have a real conversation about what comes next. And Rory? She looked up at me, mascara starting to smudge under her eyes. If you think finding two men half my age is impressive, wait until you see what one man with 15 years of experience in information warfare can accomplish when he puts his mind to it. I walked toward the stairs, leaving her standing there with her phone and her empty water glass, and the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd underestimated exactly who she was dealing with. The game, as they say, was afoot. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the hours until dawn in my home office, a converted bedroom that Rory had always complained was too cluttered with computer equipment and client files. Tonight, that clutter felt like an arsenal. By 6 a.m., I had a complete picture of my wife's affair. Not just the text messages, those were amateur hour. I'd pulled call logs, location data, credit card transactions, even the metadata from photos she'd sent to Callum that I really wished I hadn't seen. The affair had been going on for 2 months. They'd been careful at first, meeting for coffee, keeping things professional. Callum had been hired to do some social media consulting for Rory's PR firm, which explained how they'd met. But careful had quickly become careless, and careless had become stupid. I printed everything, organized it in folders, and locked it in my office safe. Then I made coffee and waited for Rory to wake up. She stumbled downstairs around 10, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas and the expression of someone who'd spent the night hoping the previous evening had been a nightmare. "Jace," she started, but I held up a hand. "Coffee's fresh," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "We need to talk, but you need to be awake for it." She poured herself a cup and sat across from me at the kitchen island. In the morning light, she looked older than her 35 years, and I found myself wondering when that had happened. "About last night?" "Last night was honest," I said. "Probably the most honest you've been with me in months. I appreciate that." She blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "I've been thinking about what you said," I continued, "about options, about being young, about finding two men half my age." I finally looked up from the screen. "You're right. You absolutely could do that. The question is, what happens next?" "What do you mean?" I turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a document I'd spent the morning preparing, a detailed breakdown of our shared assets, debts, and financial obligations. "I mean that divorce is a business transaction, Rory, and like any business transaction, the outcome depends on leverage, timing, and information." I sipped my coffee. "The good news is, I have a lot of information. The bad news is, most of it isn't particularly flattering to you." Her face went pale again. "You can't use those messages in court. That's private communication." "Actually, since they were sent from a device on our shared family plan and stored on our shared cloud account, they're legally discoverable in divorce proceedings." I smiled. "But who said anything about court? I was thinking more about the court of public opinion." "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" I pulled up another window on the laptop. "Your biggest client is Henderson Industries, right? A family-owned company, very traditional values. I wonder how they'd feel knowing their PR representative has been conducting an affair with a social media influencer who, according to these messages, has some very interesting opinions about boring corporate clients and their outdated moral standards." Rory's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "Then there's your mother," I continued. I know how important her approval is to you. How do you think she'd react to some of the more creative things you've written about your marriage? About me? About the man she still thinks of as the son she never had? Stop. I'm just getting started. I opened another folder. Callum's interesting, too. Did you know he's been seeing a therapist for anxiety? It's in his insurance claims. Apparently all that confidence is just for show. I wonder how he'd handle having his private life become very, very public. Rory stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. What do you want, Jace? What do I want? I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that the game you've been playing has rules, and I know those rules better than you do. This isn't a game. Everything is a game, Rory. Marriage is a game. Divorce is a game. Adultery is definitely a game. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured backyard. The only question is whether you want to play by civilized rules or street rules. What's the difference? I turned back to face her. Civilized rules mean we handle this quietly. You move out, we split things fairly, and nobody's reputation gets destroyed in the process. Street rules mean I make sure everyone in your professional and social circle knows exactly what kind of person you really are. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold. And Callum? Callum made his choice when he decided to pursue a married woman. He gets to live with the consequences of that choice. For a long moment, we stood there in silence. Outside, I could hear our neighbor starting his lawnmower, the sound of suburban normalcy continuing regardless of the drama playing out in our kitchen. I never meant for it to happen, Rory said finally. It just did. I believe you, I said, and I actually did. But intent doesn't change impact. You made choices, Rory. Every text message, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while you were planning your exit strategy, those were choices. So what happens now? I walked back to the island and picked up my coffee cup. Now you decide which version of this story gets told. The version where you had a moment of weakness and we handled it like adults, or the version where you systematically betrayed your marriage and tried to humiliate your husband on your way out the door. She was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours, I said. After that, I start making my own choices about how this plays out. I left her sitting there and went back to my office. I had work to do, and for the first time in months, I was actually looking forward to it. The afternoon brought a series of text messages from Rory, each one more desperate than the last. She wanted to talk. She wanted to explain. She wanted me to understand that it wasn't about me, it was about her. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I made a few phone calls. To my lawyer, to set up a consultation. To my accountant, to review our financial situation. To Finn, my assistant at the security firm, to let him know I might need some technical support for a personal matter. Finn had worked with me for 5 years. He was 28, brilliant with computers, and had a flexible relationship with conventional morality that made him very good at his job. "Boss," he said when I called, "you sound different. Everything okay?" "Define okay," I said. "But yes, I'm fine. I just need you to do some research for me, completely legal, completely above board, but thorough." "What kind of research?" I gave him Callum's full name and social media handles. "I want to know everything there is to know about this person. Financial situation, business relationships, family connections, legal troubles, embarrassing moments, everything." "How deep do you want me to go?" "Deep enough to find leverage, not deep enough to get us arrested." Finn was quiet for a moment. "This wouldn't happen to be personal, would it?" "Very personal." "Got it. Give me 24 hours. That evening, Rory tried a different approach. She cooked dinner, something she hadn't done in months, and set the table with our good china. She'd changed into a dress I'd always liked and done her hair the way she used to when we were dating. "I thought we could talk," she said when I came downstairs. "Really talk, not like this morning." I sat down across from her and served myself from the pasta dish she'd prepared. It was actually quite good, which somehow made the whole situation more depressing. "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued. "About choices and consequences. And you're right. I made terrible choices. I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that." I nodded, continuing to eat. The pasta really was excellent. "But Jace, we can't go back to the way things were. Even if I ended things with Callum tomorrow, even if I begged your forgiveness and promised never to stray again, we both know it wouldn't work." "Why not?" She looked surprised by the question. Because too much has happened. Because we've grown apart. Because we want different things." "What do you want, Rory?" I want to feel alive again. I want to feel desired and exciting and young. She reached across the table toward my hand, but I moved it away. I want to be with someone who sees me as an adventure, not a responsibility. And what do you think I want? I think you want someone who appreciates stability and security and the life you've built. She paused. I think you want someone who isn't me. I set down my fork and really looked at her. In the candlelight, she was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. But she was right. Something fundamental had changed, and there was no going back. Okay, I said. Okay? Okay, we'll get divorced. Quietly, amicably, and without destroying each other in the process. I picked up my wine glass. On one condition. Hope flickered in her eyes. What condition? You end things with Callum, completely, tonight. Jace, I'm not asking you to do it for me, Rory. I'm asking you to do it for yourself. Because if you don't, if you walk straight from our marriage into his arms, then this becomes a different kind of story. The kind where the wronged husband decides to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened. She was quiet for a long time, twirling pasta around her fork without eating it. What if I'm in love with him? Then you'll get over it, I said, because love that starts with betrayal never ends well. Trust me on this. I'm something of an expert on betrayal now. After dinner, she went upstairs to make the call. I could hear her voice through the ceiling, muffled but clearly emotional. The conversation went on for over an hour. When she came back down, her eyes were red, but her expression was resolved. It's done, she said. Good. I stood up and started clearing the dishes. I'll have my lawyer draw up papers. Fair split, no-fault divorce, sealed records. We can have this finished in 60 days. And then what? I looked at her, this woman who had been my wife, who was about to become my ex-wife, who had just given up her lover to save her reputation. Then you go find those 2 men half my age, I said, and I figure out what comes next. But even as I said it, I knew what came next. I'd been thinking about it all day, planning it, preparing for it. Rory might have ended things with Callum, but Callum didn't know that yet. And when he found out, when he realized he'd lost both his lover and his leverage, he was going to do something stupid. I was counting on it. Finn called me at 7 the next morning with a voice full of barely contained excitement. Boss, you're going to want to hear this. Your boy Callum is not what he appears to be. I was already dressed and having coffee in my office, having spent another sleepless night planning my next moves. Tell me. On the surface, he's exactly what you'd expect. Trust fund kid, lifestyle influencer, more abs than brains. But dig a little deeper, and things get interesting. I could hear keyboard clicks in the background. Oh, his trust fund? It's not as big as he pretends. Most of his money comes from sponsored posts and appearance fees, and that income stream is more fragile than people realize. How fragile? He's 3 months behind on his car payments, 2 months behind on rent for that fancy downtown apartment, and he just got dropped by his biggest sponsor for brand inconsistency, whatever that means. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of brand inconsistency? Photos of him getting wasted at parties, mostly. Turns out wellness influencers aren't supposed to be seen doing shots at 2 a.m. Finn paused. But here's the really interesting part. He's been telling people he's about to land a big consulting contract that will solve all his money problems. Let me guess, with Rory's PR firm. Bingo. Except according to the firm's internal emails, which I definitely didn't hack, but which someone definitely left unsecured on their server, there is no consulting contract. It was all just an excuse for them to spend time together. I smiled for the first time in days. So he's broke, desperate, and about to find out his meal ticket just disappeared. That's not even the best part, Finn continued. I also found his dating profiles. All of them. Turns out our boy Callum has been very busy. Your wife wasn't his only married conquest. Send me everything, I said. And Finn, good work. Thanks, boss. But I have to ask, what exactly are you planning here? Nothing illegal, I said. Just making sure the truth comes to light at the most appropriate moment. I spent the morning reviewing Finn's research and refining my strategy. Callum was a predator, but he was also an amateur. He'd gotten sloppy, left digital footprints everywhere, and now he was about to discover that actions have consequences. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Entrance, 2 p.m. Come alone. C. I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Finn with a note. Game time. Riverside Park was a sprawling green space along the waterfront, popular with joggers and dog walkers. The north entrance led to a secluded area near the river, perfect for a private conversation, or a confrontation. I arrived early and positioned myself on a bench with a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 2 o'clock, Callum appeared, looking around nervously before spotting me. He was everything Rory's messages had described. Tall, athletic, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that required significant time and money. But up close, I could see the stress lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. "Jace," he said, approaching cautiously. "Callum." I didn't stand up. "You wanted to talk." He sat down on the far end of the bench, maintaining distance. "Rory told me she ended things between us." "She did?" "Because you threatened her." I turned to look at him directly. "I gave her a choice. She made it. That's how choices work." "You blackmailed her with private messages." "I informed her of the potential consequences of her actions. There's a difference." I leaned back against the bench. "But I'm curious. What exactly did you think was going to happen here? That you'd convince me to let her go? That you'd threaten me into backing down?" Callum's jaw tightened. "I thought we could handle this like adults." "Adults don't pursue married women, Callum. Adults don't build relationships on lies and betrayal." I pulled out my phone and opened one of the files Finn had sent me. Adults also don't pretend to be successful entrepreneurs when they're actually 3 months behind on rent. The color drained from his face. "How did you? I told you yesterday that I work in information security. Did you think that was just a job title?" I scrolled through the document on my phone. Callum Torvin, age 33, trust fund reduced to $12,000 last year. Primary income from social media endorsements down 60% in the last 6 months, currently facing eviction proceedings. "You have no right. I have every right to know who my wife was planning to leave me for." I put the phone away. "But here's what I find really interesting. You've done this before, haven't you? Pursued married women, convinced them to leave their husbands, then moved on when things got complicated." He stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this?" "No, you don't. You can walk away right now, disappear from Rory's life permanently, and we can all move on with our lives." I remained seated, keeping my voice calm. "Or you can keep pushing, and I can show everyone in your social media circle exactly what kind of person you really are." "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone again and showed him the screen. It was his Instagram profile, but with a new post I'd prepared. A compilation of screenshots from his various dating profiles, all the married women he'd been pursuing, all the lies he'd told. "All I have to do is hit publish," I said. "Your followers will see it. Your sponsors will see it. Everyone in Rory's social circle will see it. How do you think that will affect your brand?" Callum lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone. I was ready for it. I'd been expecting this reaction. I stood up and stepped back, letting him stumble forward off balance. "That's assault, Callum," I said calmly. "In a public park with security cameras. Do you really want to add that to your problems?" He straightened up, breathing hard. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won?" "I think I've protected my interests and my wife's reputation. What happens next is entirely up to you." For a moment, I thought he might try to attack me again. His hands were clenched into fists, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. But then something changed in his expression. Calculation replacing rage. "Fine," he said. "You win this round. But Jace, this isn't over. Rory came to me because she was unhappy with you, with your marriage, with the life you built together. That doesn't just go away because you scared her into submission." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's not your problem anymore." He turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, then pulled out my phone and sent a message to Finn. Phase 2 is a go. That evening, Rory and I had our final conversation as husband and wife. She'd spent the day packing, preparing to move into a furnished apartment downtown while we finalized the divorce. "Callum came to see you today," she said. "It wasn't a question." He did. We had a very productive conversation about boundaries and consequences." She was quiet for a moment, folding clothes into a suitcase. "What did you say to him?" "The truth about his financial situation, his pattern of behavior, his real motivations for pursuing you." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her pack. "Did you know you weren't the first married woman he'd targeted?" Her hand stilled on the silk blouse she'd been folding. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Callum has a type, Rory. Successful women, unhappy marriages, substantial assets. He's done this before, multiple times." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence Finn had compiled. Dating profiles, message histories, financial records. The pattern was unmistakable. Rory sank down on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen. "I don't understand." He said he loved me. I'm sure he did, right up until the moment he realized there was no consulting contract, no easy payday, no wealthy divorcee to support his lifestyle. But we had something real. I sat down beside her, careful to maintain distance. You had something that felt real. There's a difference. Callum is very good at making women feel special, desired, understood. It's his job, Rory. It's how he makes his living. She was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down at her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of it, for the affair, for the things I said, for throwing away what we had for someone who was just using me. I know you are. Can you ever forgive me? I considered the question seriously. I can forgive you for being unhappy. I can forgive you for wanting something different. I can even forgive you for the affair. People make mistakes when they're lost and confused. I paused. But I can't forget it, Rory. And I can't trust you again. Not the way a marriage requires. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. So we're really doing this. We're really doing this. That night, after Rory left for her new apartment, I sat in my office and reviewed the final phase of my plan. Callum thought this was over, thought he could just walk away and find another target, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated exactly how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine, even if what was mine was just the principle of the thing. I opened my laptop and began typing. It was time for Callum to learn that some games have consequences that last long after the final move. 3 days after Rory moved out, Callum made his first mistake. He posted a new Instagram story, a carefully staged photo of himself at an expensive restaurant, champagne glass raised to the camera with the caption, "New beginnings and better days ahead." The post was clearly meant to send a message. To Rory, to me, to anyone following the drama. It said he was unbothered, successful, moving on to bigger and better things. What it actually did was give me the opening I'd been waiting for. I screenshotted the post and sent it to Finn with a simple message. Time to go live. Within an hour, Callum's social media presence began to unravel. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious. Instead, it was a slow, methodical dismantling that looked entirely organic. First, someone tagged him in a post about influencers who fake their lifestyle, complete with screenshots of his overdue bills and eviction notices. The post went viral in his circle within hours. Then, his ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago, the married woman he'd pursued before Rory, suddenly found the courage to share her story. How he'd love-bombed her, convinced her to leave her husband, then disappeared when he realized she wouldn't be as financially generous as he'd hoped. By evening, 3 more women had come forward with similar stories. The pattern was unmistakable, and the social media mob was hungry for a target. Callum's follower count began dropping rapidly. His remaining sponsors started distancing themselves. The carefully constructed image he'd spent years building crumbled in real time, but the best part was yet to come. At exactly 9 p.m., I received the text message I'd been expecting. "You did this. I know it was you. We need to talk." I replied immediately. "Riverside Park, North Entrance, 10 p.m. Come alone." This time, I wasn't early. I arrived at exactly 10 o'clock to find Callum pacing near the entrance like a caged animal. His carefully styled hair was disheveled, his designer clothes wrinkled. The stress of the day had aged him years. "You destroyed me," he said without preamble. "My career, my reputation, everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I just made sure the truth came to light. Everything that's happening to you right now is the natural consequence of your own actions. Those women wouldn't have said anything if you hadn't encouraged them. Those women had every right to tell their stories. I just made sure they knew they weren't alone." I stepped closer. "Tell me, Callum, how many others were there? How many married women did you target before Rory?" His hands were shaking now, either from anger or withdrawal from whatever substances he used to maintain his artificial confidence. "You don't understand. I cared about Rory. What we had was real. What you had was a transaction. She got validation and excitement. You got access to her money and connections. The only difference between you and a prostitute is that prostitutes are honest about what they're selling." He swung at me then, a wild, desperate punch that I saw coming from a mile away. I stepped aside and let him stumble past me, then grabbed his wrist and twisted just hard enough to make him gasp. "That's your second mistake," I said quietly. "The first was thinking you could manipulate my wife. The second is thinking you can intimidate me." I released his wrist and stepped back. He cradled his arm against his chest, breathing heavily. "You want to know what your real problem is, Callum? You're a predator, but you're not very good at it. You leave evidence everywhere, you get emotionally involved with your marks, and you don't know when to cut your losses and run. I'm not a predator. You target vulnerable women in unhappy marriages. You love bomb them until they're emotionally dependent on you. You isolate them from their support systems. You manipulate them into making decisions that benefit you financially and socially. I ticked off each point on my fingers. If that's not predatory behavior, what would you call it? He didn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to leave town tonight. You're going to delete all your social media accounts, change your phone number, and disappear from everyone's life, permanently. And if I don't, I pulled out my phone and showed him a video file. It was security footage from the restaurant where he'd posted his celebratory champagne photo. Footage showing him dining and dashing, sticking the waitress with a $100 bill he couldn't afford to pay. If you don't, this video goes to the police, along with evidence of the credit card fraud you committed to pay for those designer clothes. I scrolled to another file, plus documentation of the tax evasion, the identity theft, and the restraining order your actual ex-girlfriend filed against you in California. His face went white. How did you? I told you, Callum. Information security is what I do, and you left a lot of information lying around for someone who knew where to look? For a long moment, we stood there in silence. The park was empty except for us, the city lights reflecting off the river in the distance. You've ruined my life, he said finally. No, I replied. I've ended your career as a con artist. What you do next is up to you. You can disappear quietly and start over somewhere else, maybe even legitimately this time. Or you can keep pushing, and I can make sure every law enforcement agency in 3 states knows exactly what you've been doing. He turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, then pulled out my phone and called Finn. It's done, I said. Make sure he actually leaves town. If he's still here in 48 hours, release everything to the authorities. You got it, boss. How do you feel? I considered the question. How did I feel? Not satisfied, exactly. Not vindicated, so just tired. I feel like I need a drink, I said. The next morning, I woke up in my empty house to find 2 messages waiting for me. The first was from Finn, confirming that Callum had indeed left town, apparently driving through the night toward Los Angeles, where he had family. The second was from Rory. I saw what happened online. I know it was you. Thank you for protecting me from him. Even after everything I did to you, I hope someday you can find someone who deserves you. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. 2 weeks later, our divorce was finalized. Rory got the settlement we'd agreed on. Enough to start over comfortably, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. I kept the house, the business, and my self-respect. I also kept the lessons I'd learned about trust, betrayal, and the price of underestimating people. On the day the papers were signed, I stood in my office looking out at the city skyline, thinking about Rory's parting words that night when this all began. Tonight, I can find 2 men half your age. She'd been right, of course. She probably could have found 2 men half my age, or 3, or 10. Youth and beauty open doors that experience and wisdom sometimes can't. But what she'd failed to understand was that finding someone and keeping someone are entirely different skills, and that sometimes the quiet, underestimated husband in the corner has more power than anyone realizes. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and raised it toward the window. Tonight, I said to the empty room, I found 2 people who learned that actions have consequences. Not half my age, but half as smart. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Rory was starting her new life, probably already regretting the choices that had led her here. Somewhere else, Callum was discovering that running away doesn't erase the past. And here, in my house that was finally quiet again, I was learning that revenge, when properly executed, tastes exactly like justice. The game was over. I had won. But more importantly, I had remembered who I was. Not just the quiet, accommodating husband who'd been taken for granted, but the man who'd built a successful business by being smarter, more patient, and more thorough than his competition. Some lessons, I reflected, are worth the tuition, even when the tuition costs you a marriage. I finished my whiskey and went back to work. There were clients to serve, problems to solve, and a life to rebuild. But for the first time in months, I was looking forward to all of it. The reckoning was complete.